Hey, thanks for tuning in. Got a real story for you today. Let's dive right in. I honestly don't know what I expected. Maybe a weak apology, some lame excuse, anything that even smelled like damage control. But when she finally looked at me, really looked, and just said, "You'll get over it," I knew. She just didn't care. Not even a little. I'd come home early, not because I was suspicious, not exactly. It was this gnawing feeling, deep down, like my gut was screaming at me to be there. Instinct. Pure and simple, and I couldn't shake it. I remember turning the key in the lock, the apartment hitting me with this weird vibe right away. Living room lights were low, her chill-out setting, but she wasn't there. No book, no TV, just dead quiet. Then I saw it. Her phone, smack dab on the kitchen counter. Sarah never left her phone. Never. It was practically glued to her hand, an extra limb. But there it was, screen lit up with a fresh notification. That's when the first hairline crack appeared in my world. I didn't have to hunt for anything. The message was right there on the lock screen. Can't stop thinking about last night. I just stared at it, my brain short-circuiting. This couldn't be real. Not Sarah. Not us. My hands felt numb as I picked up the phone, swiped up without even thinking. My heart was hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. The chat was open. The name, some random dude, didn't even register. It was the words. No cheesy love poems, no dramatic declarations, just pure, comfortable familiarity. The kind of easy intimacy that only builds up over time. A lot of time. Footsteps in the hall. I spun around, phone still in my hand, and there she was, Sarah. No gasp, no stutter, no frantic scramble for a lie. Just a flicker of recognition in her eyes. Then she sighed, like she was relieved, like this whole thing had been hanging over her head, and she was just glad it was finally out in the open. And then she dropped that bomb, that one sentence that's burned into my memory. You'll get over it. Not a question, not a plea, just a flat statement, like she was telling me the weather report, like she knew me better than I knew myself. I laughed, a harsh, broken sound, because my body didn't know what else to do. She just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for me to lose it, to scream, to cry, to demand answers. But I didn't. I just looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I saw a stranger. The woman I married wouldn't do this. The woman I married wouldn't be standing there, stone-faced, like she was telling me she forgot to grab milk at the bodega. But maybe that woman never existed. Maybe I'd fallen in love with a ghost, a figment of my own imagination. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating, like the air in a stalled subway car in August. I wanted to ask why, but what was the point? The answer was right there in her phone, in those messages. It wasn't some sudden passion, not a mistake. It was cold, calculated indifference, a slow, steady drift that had been happening right under my nose until it finally surfaced. I finally spoke, my voice surprisingly steady. No, I won't. Her eyes flickered, just for a second. Surprise, maybe. Even a hint of uncertainty. She hadn't considered that possibility. I set her phone back on the counter, walked past her into the bedroom. I needed space, even if it was just a few feet. She didn't follow, didn't say another word. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't want to hear anything she had to say. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the worn rug, my mind racing, replaying every moment that had led to this. Every late night at the office, every business trip to God knows where, every excuse. I'd been a fool, not for trusting her, but for ignoring the signs. I'd swallowed the little lies because it was easier than facing the truth, because I didn't want to be that guy, the suspicious husband, the one who always assumed the worst. But the worst had already happened. I could hear her moving around in the other room, but I stayed put. I didn't want to see her, didn't want to see that blank look she wore when she said, "You'll get over it," like it was just some minor inconvenience she'd deal with on her own time. I started running through the last few months, each memory clicking into place, another piece of the puzzle falling into line. The business trips, the late nights, the sudden distance, the way she guarded her phone like it held state secrets, the little fights that blew up over nothing. At the time, I'd chalked it up to stress, maybe just the normal ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. But now, it was crystal clear. She'd been justifying it all to herself, building a case in her own head, convincing herself she had a reason to detach, a reason to cheat. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. I knew it. Right now, all I felt was this bone-deep exhaustion, the kind that makes it hard to breathe, let alone stand up. She hadn't even tried to hide it. She hadn't been careful, hadn't been discreet. Because she'd assumed I wouldn't leave, that I'd be hurt, devastated, sure, but eventually I'd forgive her. That was her mistake. I wasn't going to be another cliché. I wasn't going to be the guy who stayed, who forgave because it was easier. I stood up. The decision was clear, sharp, like a shard of glass. This marriage was over. The only thing left was for her to catch up. I don't know how long I stood there in the bedroom, staring at the wall, watching everything we'd built crumble in real time. When I finally walked out, she was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through Instagram like nothing had happened. No attempt to smooth things over, no fake remorse, no nervous energy. She wasn't worried, and that hit me the hardest. She didn't think she had anything to lose. I grabbed my keys, walked out, and got in the car. I needed air, space to be anywhere but there. But the thing is, you can't outrun something like this. It follows you, seeps into your skin, into your thoughts, into the empty spaces in your chest. I drove, just drove, no destination. Ended up in some deserted parking lot overlooking the East River, staring at the dashboard like it held the answers. I could have stayed out all night, but I eventually went back. She was already asleep, sprawled out in our bed, like it was just another Tuesday night, business as usual. For a while, I let it be. Not because I forgave her, not because I wanted to fix anything, but because I needed to see what she would do next. Would she break the silence? Would she try to explain? Would she at least pretend to care? She didn't. The next morning she went through her routine, totally unfazed. Coffee, emails, a quick check of the weather on her phone. I sat across from her at our little kitchen table, watching, waiting. Nothing. Not a single word about the night before, no hesitation, no guilt, not even a half-hearted attempt at small talk about the Mets game. I tested it just to be sure. I didn't say anything either. I wanted to see how long she could keep up the act, how long she could pretend that last night hadn't cracked something fundamental between us. Days bled into each other. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. She still came home late from her gallery openings, still kept her phone practically surgically attached to her hand, still acted like I was just part of the furniture, something she'd grown used to, something she didn't have to think about. But everything was different for me. Our apartment on the Upper West Side, the one place that had always felt like mine, now felt like a stranger's space. The walls seemed to close in. The air felt heavy. Even the way the sunlight streamed through the windows seemed wrong, like it was exposing something ugly I hadn't seen before. I stopped eating dinner at the table with her. I stopped responding to her casual, "How was your day?" questions. I stopped pretending we were just going through some temporary rough patch, because this wasn't temporary. This was the aftermath, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could stand living inside it. She, however, seemed oblivious, or maybe just didn't care enough to notice. She kept going through the motions, acting like my absence didn't matter, as if the fire she'd set to everything we had built was nothing but smoke, something to be blown away with a shrug. So I forced it. It wasn't planned, not really. I wasn't waiting for some perfect moment. The perfect moment had passed the second she'd looked me in the eye in our kitchen and told me so casually, "You'll get over it." I just walked in one evening, saw her perched on the couch in the living room, bathed in the blue light of her laptop, and said, "We need to talk." She didn't even look up right away, just finished typing something, closed the laptop with a snap, like she was doing me some huge favor by giving me her attention. "Okay," she said, finally glancing up. That was it. No hesitation, no concern, just that same empty, indifferent okay. I sat down across from her in the armchair by the window. I was done playing her game. "How long?" I asked, my voice flat. Her lips tightened slightly, just enough to show me she hadn't expected that question. "Does it matter?" she replied, almost bored. I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Yeah, Sarah, it does." She sighed, finally leaning back against the couch cushions, crossing her arms. "A while." "A while," I repeated, nodding slowly. I'd already known deep down, but hearing her say it out loud so casually made it sink in differently, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "Why?" I asked, the question just slipping out. She tilted her head, studying me like I'd asked her to solve some complex equation. "Because I could," she said, shrugging, like it was the simplest, most obvious answer in the world. "That's it?" I pressed, trying to wrap my head around her cold, brutal honesty. "What do you want me to say, Michael?" she asked, like I was the one being unreasonable. "That I was unhappy? That I felt trapped? Would that make you feel better?" It wasn't her words that hit me. Not exactly. It was the way she said them, completely devoid of emotion, without a trace of remorse. She had no interest in softening the blow, no desire to pretend. She'd already accepted that I knew the truth, and she had no reason to dress it up in lies. "You didn't even try to hide it," I said, shaking my head, more to myself than to her. "Did you want me to find out?" A beat of silence. Then, "I didn't care if you did." I just stared at her. Everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about Sarah, shattering in that moment. She hadn't done this because she was lost, or because she was in love with someone else. She hadn't done it because she was searching for something she couldn't find in our life together. She'd done it because, to her, I was never really a factor in her decisions at all. I wasn't someone she had betrayed. I was just someone who happened to find out. Something inside me clicked into place, a clean, sharp sound, like a lock releasing. The last shred of whatever hold she had over me, whatever illusion I'd been clinging to, finally snapped. "You think I'm gonna stay?" I asked, leaning forward, looking her dead in the eye. "You think I'll just move past this? That I'll wake up one day and decide this isn't worth throwing everything away for?" Her expression didn't change. She didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just waited, watching, probably expecting me to break, to crack. I didn't. "You're wrong," I said, the words firm, quiet, no hesitation. And that's when it hit her. The flicker of surprise in her eyes told me everything. She hadn't considered this. She had genuinely assumed that no matter what, I would stay, that her actions would just be a blip, a temporary rough patch we'd eventually smooth over. She had miscalculated, badly. But there was no going back. She recovered quickly, though, slipping back into that cold, detached confidence. The same expression she'd given me the night she'd said, "You'll get over it." Like she was still convinced this was all just a phase, a dramatic outburst, and I'd eventually come crawling back. I stood up, grabbed my leather jacket from the back of the armchair, and walked past her without another word. "Where are you going?" she asked, a sliver of curiosity finally creeping into her voice. I didn't answer. I didn't even slow down, because this wasn't her game anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. Couldn't. My mind was too sharp, too clear. For weeks, months maybe, I'd been lost in a fog of confusion, of hurt. But now, finally, I knew exactly what had to be done. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I didn't need revenge, didn't need some grand theatrical confrontation. What I wanted, what I needed, was freedom. The next morning I called a lawyer. Divorce wasn't something I'd ever pictured myself navigating. But I was done wasting time, done pretending there was anything left to fix, to salvage. I was ready for it all. The paperwork, the asset division, the legal battles. Ready to make this real. She still didn't see it coming. She noticed the shift, of course. How could she not? I stopped playing along with her charade. I stopped reacting to her little games, her attempts to provoke a reaction. I wasn't waiting for something to change anymore. She wasn't the center of my world anymore. And then came the moment she hadn't prepared for. I came home one evening, dropped a stack of legal documents onto the kitchen counter, and slid them across to her. "You need to sign," I said, my voice steady. She looked down at the papers, then back up at me, still too calm, still thinking she had some kind of control. "You're serious?" she asked, a hint of disbelief, maybe even a flicker of fear in her voice. "Completely," I said, pulling a pen from my jacket pocket and setting it beside her hand. She hesitated. That was new. "We don't have to rush into this," she said, her voice measured, careful, like she was trying to regain some semblance of control. We can take some time to—" "No," I cut in, firm, final. Her mouth snapped shut, the reality finally sinking in. This wasn't a game. I wasn't playing for her attention. This was it. Final. I saw it then, the flicker of real fear in her eyes. Not fear of losing me, not fear of what she had done, but fear of losing control. For the first time since this whole mess started, she wasn't the one calling the shots. She didn't sign the papers right away. I knew she wouldn't. It wasn't about love, guilt, or regret. It was about power. Days passed. She tried to shift the dynamic, tried to pull me back in with these calculated gestures, like nothing had happened. She cooked dinner, set the table with our good china, poured the wine, and made forced, brittle small talk about gallery openings and Brooklyn real estate. But none of it was real. None of it was enough to erase the truth. And then, one morning, she signed. Not because she wanted to, not because she accepted it, but because she finally understood that I wouldn't give her another chance. She slid the papers across the kitchen table, her hand trembling slightly, and asked the question she'd been avoiding from the start. "Is this really what you want?" I picked up the papers, folded them neatly, and stood up. "No," I said, my voice still steady, still calm. "But it's what I need." And just like that, our story, our New York story, came crashing to an end.